Welcome back to Joyfully at Home. Today we're going to make something very useful around the home, and these work wonderful if you decide you want to have, say, a night of tacos or something like that, but you realize you're out of tortillas, and these will wind up being so much better than any store-bought tortilla. We're going to actually make today homemade flour tortillas. These come out nice and soft and very puffy, but not heavy. They're not a heavy tortilla at all. And sometimes the ones you buy in the store, they may be very thin, but they'll also be kind of sticky and a little hard. These ones are always wonderful. They're a favorite in our home, and lots of times I have to fend off my family eating them while they're still hot after making them, so you have any for dinner. So I think you're going to really like these, and they're very simple. If you've got an hour, you can whip these out in no time. So we're going to go ahead and show you how to make homemade flour tortillas today. So for these, very simple. You're going to start with 2.5 to 2 3/4 cup of flour. And the reason that's a little bit of a variable is because sometimes if it's more humid in your home or it's a very humid day, you might want that little bit of extra flour. You're going to have a teaspoon of salt, 3 teaspoons of baking powder. You go ahead and just kind of stir those together just so they're a little bit evenly distributed in the flour. And then we add a 1/2 cup of shortening. Now with this, if you're in a pinch and you discover you don't have any shortening in the house, if you have butter, I've used butter in the past. You can even use lard. And in a lot of cases, if you have a solid coconut oil, you can even use that. They're very forgiving. As long as you have a 1/2 cup, you can go ahead and make these. So now we'll just use a pastry blender, which is this little gadget here, and go ahead and cut our shortening into our flour to kind of make a crumbly dough. You're going to see this start to take shape, and it just makes it a little bit crumbly and incorporates this shortening, incorporates your fats into your flour. So now you can see in your flour, you've got some nice little coarse crumbs of your fats in there. You can see them kind of broken up into small little pieces. Makes your flour somewhat of a crumbly mix. And that's exactly what you want it to look like. You just make sure that you don't have any great big pieces of fat in here still. Whatever, like I say, fats you're using, whether it be shortening, lard, coconut oil, or butter. Now you take 1 cup of nice hot water. Doesn't have to be boiling, just a nice hot water. I generally just use as hot as I can go from the tap, and that's just fine. You put your 1 cup of hot water in there, and then just stir this up into a dough. Get it all nice and stirred up. It'll look very wet to begin with, and that's just fine. Now as you're getting your dough pretty well set, you're going to see it starting to come together. And just kind of with your spoon, I generally use a wooden spoon. Whatever you have is fine. Wooden spoon, a paddle, plastic spoon, or even a metal spoon is just fine. You'll see it comes together kind of as a ball. Get it so it's in a rough ball. And then we will go ahead and let this rest for about a 1/2 hour to an hour. It's not going to rise because there's no yeast in it, just the baking powder. So it's not going to be a risen dough. It's not a yeast dough. But with the baking powder in it, it will puff slightly, which is just what you want with your tortillas. But we'll let it rest. That allows those glutens to relax, so it's not super, super stretchy. And let it rest for at least a 1/2 hour to an hour. And then we'll come back and we'll make it into our dough balls for our tortillas. Okay, now that our dough is ready, and you can test your dough a little bit. If you can push it in and you can tell it's a little soft, then you're ready to roll. So we're going to take our dough out of our bowl and literally just kind of bring it together with your hands a little bit. You may need a little bit of extra flour on your surface, and that's totally fine too, because you will want that for rolling them. It's a very soft dough. As you can tell, it's not real stiff. And just kind of shape it into a length of a, like say a log. Kind of keep it together. And because I tend to like to make sure that my tortillas are all about the same size, sometimes you can eyeball it, and if you're really good at doing that, that's totally fine. It's not necessarily precise. I generally get about 16 tortillas, sometimes 12 if you're making them larger. But for a general taco-sized tortilla, I usually get about 16 tortillas out of this. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to just cut them. And if you have like a small kitchen scale, you can go ahead and weigh them. And usually they're about 1.8 to 2.0, somewhere in that neighborhood to get the right size. And that's just about right. So they can have a little variance, but again, right about there. And it's about perfect size for a taco sized tortilla. And as you can see, I've done this a few times, so I can cut just about what I figure is going to be about a 1.8, 1.9 and make it work. Again, you get used to eyeballing this, and if you're good at it, you don't need the scale. I just use the scale because I like to make sure. So we go ahead and we'll get these cut, and then we'll roll them into our tortilla balls. Okay, so now you've got your dough portioned up. I actually got 14 because I'm making like regular taco size. Some are just a tad over 1/8, some are 2. So I got 14 this time. Like I say, depending on the size you're making, you'll get between 12 to 16. If you're making a street taco size, you could even get up to 18. So now you just take your dough and just fold it in on itself a little bit with your hand. And you just start rolling it in the palm of your hand to make a nice, smooth dough ball. Just like that. You just take one of your portions, just start rolling it in on itself with your fingertips, just like that. And then just make a nice, smooth dough ball. So now that you have all your dough balls all rolled up into your little balls, you're just going to take one on a floured surface, start to pat it down with your hand a little bit. And it's okay if you use a little extra flour. That's a good thing for these because you want to make sure they don't stick. Now what I use, and this might seem strange to some, but I like the size of it and I like the fact that it doesn't have any handles on it, is for all my tortillas, I use a fondant roller. That's exactly what this is, because you can just put your hands on the top. You can keep moving it around. You don't have to worry about a big, cumbersome, heavy rolling pin, which I have plenty of those and I use for my pies, but I like using a fondant roller. It's got a little bit of weight to it. It's great for rolling fondant, obviously, but it works wonderful for doing tortillas. And if you like the idea of a fondant roller, but you don't have one, this is a great, inexpensive little tool. It works for a lot of different things. If you're even when you're doing things like gingerbread dough and you're doing it on a pan and you can't deal with a handle on your rolling pin, it works great. So now we just take our tortilla, transfer it to a griddle. You can use a cast iron pan. You can use, in this case, I just use my electric griddle. You can even use a dry frying pan if that's what you have. As long as it's not greased and it's just a dry heat, it'll work just fine. So we just continue to roll these out. And like I say, just get them to the size you want. Throw them on your dry griddle and we'll show you how they cook up quick, easy, and you have great fresh tortillas. So that's on a cold griddle right now. Once your griddle's warmed up, they will go a little faster. So you just want to be careful that you don't burn them. Having a few little brown spots on them, that's totally fine if you choose to have them that way. We like to have them without the little brown flecks because it just makes them that much softer when you're having your tortillas. The nice fluffy softness is the way we like to have them, but you're perfectly fine if you cook them long enough to have just a couple little brown spots on them as well. Either way is fine. And if you see the way these are cooking, you'll start to see bubbles on this side. When you see those bubbles come up, that's when you know it's time to flip them. And then you just let them go for a minute or two on the other side. See how those bubbles are getting a little bit bigger. And that's how you know that that air is getting in there to puff where your fats were, making a nice fluffy tortilla. So this guy, by my estimation, is ready to flip. And so you see that it's got an ever so slight brownness to it, very slight. You can let it go just a tiny bit longer if you want to. Like I say, if you like those little brown spots on your tortilla, but it doesn't take long. And they're nice and fresh and warm and very fluffy. And we'll show you in the end just what the texture is when we go ahead and break one open. So as you see, this one has a couple little areas of just very lightly brown. And on this side as well, you see it still puffs up nicely. That's the perfect time to pull them. I'm going to pull them, put them on a piece of parchment paper on a pan to let them cool. If you want to use them right away, you can use them while they're warm, which is even better. If you want to save them, you can do that as well. And you just, when they're cool, completely cool, you can put them in a Ziploc bag and store them in the refrigerator. They're easy and they're wonderful. Like I say, we'll take a few pictures in the end when we have them all finished, and you'll see the texture inside. We're going to continue now to finish cooking the rest of our tortillas, and we'll have a batch ready for dinner.